what SDS is. It is a identity management as well as a student information import system. So any SIS or MIS, a management information system, can be linked with SDS in a couple different ways. The most common is going to be with CSV files, and that information is brought in to your Office 365 tenant. With this, it can create users, M365 groups, which then get turned into teams, administrative units, security groups, can be integrated with different applications such as the parent app, so much. And we're also adding different services, different applications to it regularly. The key feature of this is going to be the user enrollment, though. That's what a majority of the customers that we've worked with in the past have been excited about, because as a lot of you know, one of the most difficult things in a education environment is making sure that everyone gets into the correct classes, as well as managing that class enrollment, that class rostering. The other big thing that is integrated with SDS is going to be education insights. There's a few updates coming with that in the future, so please keep your eyes out for that. I can't really talk about them right now, but it should be fairly good whenever it comes to any analytics that you'd like to do in the future. As far as the architecture of School Data Sync, this is a very simplified version of it. What we have is the student information system, the actual database of the information, and moving it over into SDS. Just a visual representation of it and what it connects to. But as far as how to deploy, when to deploy, there's a few things to keep in mind. The first and foremost is, how are you going to deploy? As I mentioned, the most common is going to be CSV files, but we do actually support OneRoster API integrations. The only version of OneRoster is going to be OneRoster v1.1. As for the CSV files, we do support a couple different ones, SDS version 1, version 2.1, as well as Clever format. And OneRoster version 1, you can actually run our toolkit with to transform it into SDS version 1 files. For the future and all of our customers that we're working with currently, we are recommending version 2.1, and any of our customers that we are working with, have worked with in the past, we're encouraging to switch over to 2.1 because of a new version of School Data Sync that we're coming out with. Next with that, though, we have the source and prepping that for Azure Active Directory and integration. The source in this is always going to be the source database, the primary collection of all of your data. We want to make sure that when it's coming into Azure Active Directory that it is clean, that you're only trying to import data that you want and making sure that data is correct. The most common issues that we see are going to be errors that are centered around users, most specifically the user matching. Probably the username doesn't match exactly what's in Azure Active Directory. Like there might be a spelling or punctuation error in the domain or username, something like that. The next up is going to be the attributes that you want to include, because there is a very large portion of the CSV files that are dedicated to extension attributes. These are attributes that can help with different filterings within Education Insights, but also provide different data points on the users themselves that you can pull up through PowerShell. After that are going to be different deployment settings that are optional, such as security groups, related contacts. That's going to be the parents and guardians that you want to append onto users, as well as some of the other settings, such as I'll show you when I do the presentation, live demo of it. Because we are going to be recommending the 2.1, I wanted to make sure that we did talk about both, just that we have the comparison between them. For SDS version 1, there is a total of 6 files. That's going to be the main files as well as 2 optional for the parent and guardian, so 8 in total there. For SDS version 2.1, there is a minimum of 5 out of the 10 files that are required, so less than SDS version 1, and 5 optional files. Those optional files are going to be centered around the extension attributes, demographics, as well as the org structure. SDS version 1 has a very limited organization structure that can be done. It only has the individual schools within the school CSV file, and then the classes at those schools. Whereas in version 2.1, it has an expanded structure. So you can have the entire Department of Education, Ministry of Education listed in the orgs file, and then within the orgs file itself, you can actually split that up into different sectors, different areas underneath that organization. So you can have the department, district, all the way down to the individual schools, and even then you can get further removed, moving into different areas of study. So mathematics and such. That's a little bit more granular than what we'd recommend because we do have other files that would support that. The other thing that I wanted to mention here as far as version 2.1 is the expanded roles that we have. SDS version 1, the roles in it are string attributes, so you can put in whatever you want, and then those pieces of information will be written onto the users, the administrative units within the education extension attributes, just as a string variable. One of the drawbacks is that SDS 2.1 right now only supports a enumerated list. So there's a specific list of values that we accept, and anything outside of that list will be rejected, will error. There are plans to expand that in the future, but right now it has to be those roles that are listed within our documentation. Now, one of the biggest questions is, which version do I use? Normally, API, if you can process information with an API, that's usually the easiest. But for a lot of our customers, CSV is going to be the only option. With version 1 and version 2.1, you are more than welcome to sync with either one. But as I mentioned, we are moving all of our customers over to version 2.1. In the future, version 1 is going to be going away. There hasn't been a set ETA on when that is going to happen, but it is going to be deprecated at some point in the future. Because of that, any customers that have a critical need to deploy SDS, we are more than happy to work with you. And because version 1 is our most utilized, most tested version that we have, we usually deploy with that first, and then work on a process, a plan to deploy with version 2.1 afterwards. So because of that, we are recommending to any customers that are interested in deploying SDS or have already deployed to use version 2.1. One of the other questions that we get is, how do I deploy? From all the integrations that SDS has, it has been complicated for some customers because it can be very simple, but depending on the type of information, how granular you want to get, it can get more complicated than what people in general realize. For the actual deployment process itself, setting up the profile and everything, it is extremely simple. This is just a quick demo on how to do it. If you ever go to sds.microsoft.com, you'll log in and be directed to this page here. This is if you haven't set up SDS or if you've deleted your profile. If you have set up SDS in the past, you'll actually have a little board here that will say your current profile, the status of it. But as far as how to deploy, add profile, enter your name for the profile. So we will do 2022 to 2023. the method that we're going to use, CSV or API. As I mentioned, since CSV is going to be our most popular, I'll be doing that here, as well as the different formats. We'll do version 2.1, and then from there, it's simple, just 3 pages. First option is going to be if we're syncing to existing users or new users. This means if the users already exist within Azure Active Directory within Office 365, we will look for those user accounts and update them accordingly. The new users would be if we are creating users in Azure Active Directory. This one isn't used as often because a lot of organizations already have the users within Office 365, or they've already set up certain automations to create those users when necessary. So I'll be doing existing users. And importing the data. We need to select the files that we're going to be uploading. I'll be using all 10 files, so all the 5 required files, as well as the 5 optional. I've done this a few times, so I've got a few different formats here. Just select all of these, and now it's going to do the pre-validation portion. This itself is just going to check the files for any sort of drastic errors, so a missing header that's going to be required, or an invalid file name, because those do have to be specific. Go. Next up is going to be the team creation option. If you would prefer, SDS can actually skip the team creation. It will still create the M365 group, but it will not provision that group into a class team. You can instead do that at a later point through scripting, or if you'd like to do it with SDS at a point in the future, you can actually edit the profile, enable this, and then press reset sync. That's a little bit more drastic, but it can be done. The option to replace unsupported special characters. This will actually replace anything that is not a supported character, such as a asterisk, an ampersand, with a underscore. We usually recommend this for any customers that have a foreign alphabet, such as Cyrillic, Arabic characters, anything like that, just to avoid any sort of conflict and any sort of breakage within the sync itself. The sync option for class group display name. This setting itself has caused some confusion in the past, but the important thing to note is that no matter what this setting is, whether it's enabled or disabled, teachers will always be able to change the display name of their group. They are the owner of that group. They will be able to do any sort of editing to it that they see fit as far as the display name, any of the settings within the team. What this is if the CSV files change for that class, it will actually force write the name back to what is in the CSV files. Otherwise, if there's no change detected within the CSV files, any changes that the owner made will remain. The delay student access is for creating the groups ahead of time and choosing to upload the enrollments at a later point. So you can upload all of the data at the same time, and then once this date hits, it will actually process the enrollments of those users. Now, the problem with this is once this date is set for the delay student access, you cannot change it. The only way to get students enrolled, if you've set the delay student access option here, is to actually create a new profile. So we only really recommend this if you are familiar with SDS and have uploaded information in the past, have utilized SDS at some point in the past. And even then, we usually recommend uploading the enrollments and actually setting this date for a day or two before the actual start date of classes. Just make sure that there's enough time to process all the information, as well as give us some time to check a couple classes and make sure that the enrollments are what we expect them to be. Set that for the 27th. And when should we stop syncing? This setting has been a little bit confusing for some customers. It doesn't kick off any sort of automation when it comes to cleanup. It doesn't do anything to archive or anything like that for any of the classes. All this does is put a lock on the class or on the profile itself so that it will no longer accept any incoming data. This is just to help prevent anything as far as a new semester to be loaded on a previous semester's data, to help give instructors time at the end of the semester to clean up their own classes if they'd like to, copy any sort of data that they'd like to their own OneDrive. Same thing for students. We'll just go ahead and set this. So 2023, we'll go ahead and make it May. There we go. And next we have the user options as far as mapping. There is going to be the username, which is the only supported option. And that's going to be mapping to the user principal or mail within Azure Active Directory. The easiest thing that we found is to do the full UPN matching from the username and the source to the UPN in Azure Active Directory. From here, we have the optional attributes that I mentioned that are active or that are available onto the users. Right now, within the classic SDS, it's a little bit limited, but in new SDS, it is going to be depending on much more of the attributes. As I mentioned, I can talk about that more in the future. And that's all there is to it. You have this last page to review the different settings, different properties that you'd like to make sure that all this looks as you would like, and then create a profile. At this point, it is going to upload the CSV files to the validation servers that SDS has to actually process and make sure that the data within it isn't going to cascade into a large number of errors down the line. This means that there's actually 2 validation processes that SDS has, as well as 1 sync process. The pre-validation that I mentioned earlier that checks when the files are uploaded, if they actually meet the format that we need, and then a validation process here that is to prevent any sort of cascading errors that will happen farther down the line. So it checks to make sure that a student exists or a teacher exists within the CSV files, and if they don't, if it cannot be matched to a user within Azure Active Directory, it will remove the enrollments if those exist within the files to prevent any sort of cascading errors. If there's a user that doesn't exist and they try to get added to a class, then it will just create error after error. And there is a limit to the number of errors that can exist on a single profile. And from this point, it's just a waiting game when it comes to the actual syncing. It's fairly quick for a majority of it. The files that I uploaded are small, so it's going to take maybe 30 minutes here. I'm not going to be waiting on this page the entire time. But as far as the larger data sets that some of our customers utilize, we always want to make sure that we give ample time to sync. So there are a couple different ways that we can speed up this process, such as splitting it into different profiles. That's the most common. There's also a couple things that we could do as far as loading data sooner and having SDS process the users first, even before the entire class structure has been finalized. That's all there is to it. There has rarely ever been a time that errors did not happen on a sync profile. The most common ones, as I mentioned, are going to be users, the matching for those users. But here's a few that are fairly common as well. You get contacted by a instructor that their class had disappeared. There are a few things to remember about SDS, but one that I have said time and time again is that SDS will never delete anything. Any group that it creates, any user that it creates, will remain in the tenant until outside actions are taken, until a separate user, someone manually deletes it, or there's some other automation that you have in place to delete those objects. So what happens usually when a existing class disappears is, unfortunately, it's been getting manually deleted. It's a little bit embarrassing when this happens at times, but the most common cause is there's a backup instructor or a temporary instructor for a class, and they want to leave the class, so they choose to delete it, thinking that it's deleting it from their teams instead of deleting it from the tenant. There is a way to recover these groups within 30 days. After that 30 days, though, the only way to recover any information is going to be to attempt to restore the SharePoint site. That will be 90 days from the time of deletion. It's a little bit more risky. You won't be getting back everything, but it would be a majority of the data as far as any sort of assignments that have been uploaded, any sort of documents that have been uploaded to the team. The next one is going to be users not in their class. So students or teachers are missing from the class. There's a few different things that might cause this, but the first thing I would always recommend to any customers is to check in the SDS Admin Center to confirm that that user has a sysid or a source ID. If they do, that means that they have been successfully synced with SDS, either in this run or at some run in the previous school year. When that is confirmed, the next is going to be making sure that the CSV files contain them, because there have been a few times where the files don't have them. And then double checking to make sure that any sort of error logs, validation logs would show anything associated to those users. That could be either the source ID or the username. So make sure that you have both those at hand whenever you're looking up any sort of errors or anything like that. The last thing, if you cannot find anything within the logs, is actually going to be checking within Azure Active Directory. There is a list of audit logs that will be able to provide quite detailed information about who removed a user at what point and what service had to remove them. So if it was removed by SDS, SDS will actually process those changes with a service listed as microsoft.azure.syncfabric. This is going to be true for any changes that it makes, whether it's creating a group, adding users to groups, or even adding users to administrative units. Whereas if it's a user, the service will usually be Microsoft Teams, but it'll also have the username of the person that has removed them. There have been a few times where this has helped in the past, finding out who was removing a student, and a couple times it's actually been the student themselves. A group exists, but there is no team. This is a kind of a rare one that comes up, but it's usually because of one of two different situations. The first and most common is that the group was never teamified. It was never provisioned into a class team. This is usually because of a sync issue when it had been processed. Normally the teacher isn't added to the group, and a team must always have at least one owner. If it doesn't, that team cannot be created. There is a way to force that teamification process. We actually have a script available on our GitHub repository. But even then, it will still need to have an owner. If it's been a very large number of groups that haven't been created, it could be because of a few sync errors. It could be because of a processing issue. It could actually be a delay that had caused it to skip over. But to correct that, to fix if a large number of teams have not been created, but the groups that do exist, the best way to fix that is actually with a reset sync. because that will process all the CSV files again, as well as force the teamification. But to do that, you want to make sure that the team creation option is enabled. You also should make sure that you understand the ramifications of reset sync. As I mentioned a little bit ago, it is the entire reprocessing of the CSV files. And that means it is a mass add of data to the tenant as a whole. It won't remove users, it'll only add. So if there are other issues around users not seeing groups, missing groups entirely from M365, anything like that, a reset will help. But if the errors are centered around a user not being extracted from a class, it will not fix those. The other option to teamify a group, if you don't want to use a script, and it isn't too many, just maybe a handful, you can actually do this within the M365 Admin Center. You would just select the group itself, and then there's a separate tab for Microsoft Teams, and then in there you can choose Create Team. The other time that this happens, at least a majority of the time, if the team wasn't provisioned, or if the team was provisioned, but people are still stating that there is no team, it's usually because the team hasn't been activated. So there are two separate things that we're talking about here. We're talking about a group that does not have a team. That was the first situation. And the second is a team that exists but hasn't been activated. It's very easy to identify if a team exists. You can check that within the M365 Admin Center or the Teams Admin Center. If it exists within the Teams Admin Center, there is a team, but it will not state whether or not that team has been activated. There is a setting on the team that you'll be able to see within Microsoft Graph to identify whether or not it's been activated. It's listed as is limited to owners. Once that has been selected, once the team has been activated, there is no way to unactivate it. That will actually add these students into the team itself, and they'll be able to chat and have all the functionalities that a team normally has. We are very cautious whenever it comes to activating a team, so we actually do not have any scripts or anything like that to bulk activate. That is a precaution that we took on our side, primarily because it is considered a Teams issue, and we primarily work with Azure Active Directory. This is just a situation that normally comes up whenever we're talking about SDS. And we don't want to bulk activate teams just out of consideration for instructors. They might not be wanting to use a team, and if that team gets activated and the instructor has no intention on using it, it'd be considered a unmonitored chat room. And well, we always want to think the best of students. There have been times in the past where they aren't always kind to each other, so we're trying to limit that as much as possible. Excuse me. The profile states that the sync is complete with errors, but there are no error logs. This is a very tricky one to identify. The first thing I want to state is that there are actually two different types of error logs. There are validation errors and there are sync errors. Validation errors come from the validation process that SDS does to try and prevent any sort of cascading errors. And sync errors are the errors generated by Sync Fabric. So if a user can't be matched because they don't exist, normally that is a validation error. But if a user match was found, but they get an error trying to be added to a team, those are usually sync errors. So it's going to depend on which type of error we're expecting. If there is no error log at all as far as sync errors, you actually can get this through Graph as well. Or you can contact our support team. We will be more than happy to help out and generate a error file on our side. But as far as what causes it, it's normally processing issue on SDS side. That doesn't mean it's a processing issue all the time, but that's the most common situation. Normally, if we upload another set of CSV files, that cleans it up because it can occasionally be a UI error. But if there are any sort of processing errors, like an extraction for an API fails partway through, that would actually cause the profile to say complete without errors, or complete with errors, but not providing any sort of error log. And lastly, an error log states that it's unable to make updates to a target. This is a little bit more general when it comes to the type of error on the tenant, because it can be unable to make updates to a user, a section, a school, which in SDS means an administrative unit. This means that the object doesn't exist. In most cases, it means that the target object doesn't exist. So if you're trying to add users to a class, but you get a bunch of errors saying that unable to make updates because this target doesn't exist, it's usually because the group's been deleted. Or if it's trying to update a user, it's possible that a user has been completely removed from the CSV files. Because of the way that SDS processes changes, which is a comparison of the incoming data to the last set of data that was uploaded, if a user has been completely removed or a class has been completely removed, SDS will attempt to make all the updates to that entry that it can, but when it gets to trying to remove the user because they don't exist in files, it'll actually error out because it's not allowed to remove a user account. The only way to get rid of those types of errors, because they are valid, the user should not exist, but they previously existed within the uploaded data, is to use reset sync. Reset sync is the only way to remove the entire error log on a profile. It's also the only way to recover from quarantine. Quarantine actually happens when there is an excessive amount of errors on the profile and it gets locked down. You can upload new data, but it's not going to be processed. The only way to actually make any changes from that point forward is to upload a corrected set of data and then press reset sync. Otherwise, you'd have to delete the profile and make a new one. Regardless, you're going to have to wait for the entire processing of the files to be finished. It's rare when that does happen for a majority of the organizations that we work with. And for our larger customers, it's usually a limited issue because we do split the profile up into 3 separate profiles instead of just one large one. As I mentioned, I did want to talk a little bit about SDS as far as the future of it. As you might have noticed, I highlighted up here School Data Sync Classic. That is because there is a new form of SDS that does exist. We haven't been hiding it. We've mentioned it a couple times, and that is new SDS. It is a full new platform of School Data Sync. And as far as what it can do, what it can integrate with, it can do quite a bit, to be completely honest. Quite a bit more granular as far as what SDS Classic can do. To get there, all you have to do is go to V2. Some of you might already be familiar with this information here. This is actually the Insights Premium Admin Center, what a lot of people have referred to it as. But as far as the actual Admin Center itself, this is going to be the default SDS Admin Center in the future. As far as processing, seeing the information, probably the easiest way to do it is going to be through the run health to see the different syncs that I've completed. Because I deleted the profile that was previously on my tenant earlier, you can see that there have been successful syncs. The next time that this runs, it's going to error out because there is no profile, or at least the profile that does exist is different than the old one. And then you'll be able to see some of the errors that do exist right now. There are also a couple settings. This is going to be downloading the data lake. It's very useful whenever it comes to troubleshooting, because you'll be able to actually see the data that was uploaded and processed, as well as turn off Microsoft School Data Sync. This is going to be the same turn off option that's within the SDS Classic admin settings. As far as everything else with new SDS, there is going to be separate export functions that can be done. You'll be able to select what you want to create, not only M365 groups, but if you want to create security groups, or if you want to create administrative units. As far as SDS as it is now, Classic SDS, it will always create M365 groups, and it will always create administrative units. But there is an option to sync security groups. For the different processes to get your data in, and let's see here, is it going to, no, it's not going to let me. Unfortunately, because my tenant is a test tenant and I've spent a lot of time trying to break it, unfortunately I've been successful with that. So it's a little bit difficult with some of the settings here. And as far as the classic dashboard, there it is. Sync is complete. And this is what the profile and the SDS admin center should look. Sync complete, ready for more data. If you'd like to do anything with the profile, you're welcome to edit and then select the other settings that you'd like to enable or change. This can be the profile name, the expiration date if you want to change it for the future for any reason, as well as any of the other settings that we set throughout the profile creation. The only limits are going to be the delay student access, as I mentioned, as well as the mapping for the users. This is going to be a hard set whenever the profile is created. The other thing to note as far as the SDS profile is going to be the profile ID/instance ID. In the demonstration tomorrow, I'll be showing you how to automate CSV file uploads. And this is going to be one of the key identities that we need. This is going to link everything to the school data sync profile. Once your sync is finished, you can also look at the other global settings that we have available. So turning on and off school data sync, sending email notifications, that's what it was, student personal data protection. This will actually mark users within Azure Active Directory as students as a minor with parental consent. The blocking students from using third-party apps will actually create a all students security group and then put a conditional access policy on there to only allow Microsoft applications. And then the other settings for security groups are going to be the school security groups, which will create a security group for each individual school, as well as teachers for that school and students for the school. And next, there is the all teacher and all student security groups. This is all teachers that have been uploaded with SDS and all students that have been uploaded with SDS. If you do choose to enable the block students from using third-party apps, it automatically enables the all student security group because it is a requirement of it. And the last couple settings down here, I'll skip the password admin role for now, but the education insights section, you'll actually want to leave this enabled. If you ever disable this, you're more than welcome to, but if you ever disable it, that data that was collected up to that point will be removed and you cannot get it back. As far as the password admin goes, this feature itself is going to be removed from SDS, but for a very good reason. because this has actually been added and enhanced within the M365 Admin Center, if you were unaware. Within the M365 Admin Center, if you ever want to assign a scoped admin role, so a teacher might have given permission to manage the passwords of a school, or you might have a separate IT program for each individual school. You would just go to the groups. So it's roles, there we go. Roles, administrative units. I have a few different admin units here, and these are the students of. Let's say I want to give access for a password admin for an entire organization, entire admin unit. So everyone at Contoso Grade School that I have here. There we go. I did click on it. And then role assignments. And then here you can actually see the different scoped roles that you're able to assign here. Choose password admin. And now you can actually select any admin that you'd like to monitor the passwords and able to be contacted to update the passwords. All you have to do is select or click there and choose whoever you want to add. This can also be groups, to my knowledge. 20 users without security groups. That might be coming in the future. But regardless, you can select multiple users here. So we'll do Jack Craig and Christine Fine. And now these two users are allowed to manage the passwords, to be able to reset passwords of any users that are within this admin unit. This can go for any of the other available scoped roles. As far as the members of this admin unit, these are going to be the users and groups that are managed by those people. And good, got a couple more minutes here. I also mentioned that SDS will be able to append on different extension attributes. The extension attributes themselves can only be viewed in a couple different places. One is going to be within the SDS Admin Center. You'll be able to select a user, and in here you'll see some of the attributes, such as the phone, email, so if they have an external email address, in case you want to contact them. The only other ways to see this information is going to be with either PowerShell or through Graph API. The reason why you have to look at them in one of these three ways is because these are education-specific extension attributes. Because the role field is an education attribute, you'll actually not see it within Azure Active Directory. As far as groups go, this is a little bit different. The groups are only available to be pulled up within the SDS Admin Center or through Graph. The extension attributes for groups are still appended onto the object, like everything else, but they cannot be accessed through PowerShell. They're still on the same education endpoints. It's just that there's no way to pull up the extension attributes through either the Teams or the Azure Active Directory PowerShell modules. And lastly, I've got too many groups. There we go. We have the administrative units. Now, the downside is you're not going to be able to see anything within the SDS Admin Center because it is being worked on. You should be able to see, there we go, security group settings at the least. But as far as the administrative unit, it's going to be a little bit limited just because you'll only really have the sys ID. If you do provide any of the additional attributes, you can see that, but only through the Graph endpoints. And that, I think, should actually cover everything with SDS. I did want to get into more detail about the CSV file structure itself, but that can actually be fairly in-depth, to be completely honest. But if you ever do want to get to our documentation, just go to sds.microsoft.com. There's a quick link in there for our documentation, and there we go. This is actually going to be for New with SDS and SDS Classic. Now, this will include the data ingestion. Glad that they actually got these out. I was told on Friday that there is going to be some delay with this, so I'm very excited to see that it's available here. This will go into all the details when it comes to new SDS. I wasn't sure if it would be ready in time for this presentation, so unfortunately I didn't have time to add it. As far as Classic SDS, what we've just gone through, that'd be underneath School Data Sync Classic. As far as other valuable links to have, I have included them within the presentation itself, but a couple of points here are going to be the, see here, SDS GitHub repository. It's actually the EDU tools section. In here, we actually have samples of the CSV files, both version 1, version 2, version 2.1, as well as our scripts. The scripts that we have are going to be specific for different actions that we want to do. They will require the Microsoft Graph PowerShell module, but there's also a couple in here that are going to be proprietary. So the Get PowerSchool API is going to be specific to the PowerSchool endpoints, most likely not applicable in the majority of the customers' cases that we have. At the very least in the EU, there's a handful out there that might be utilizing PowerSchool, but not many. There are also some sections to help with cleanup, which are going to be expired section memberships, move expired sections, and the like. And there are also some team scripts that we have, just a couple, in case there's any problem, say that a class has been activated, but students cannot see it still, but they are in the group, they are in the team. We would run sync group memberships to team. Or the same thing happens for teachers. They can't see a team, they're in it. We would do the add group owners to teams. We don't use these scripts as much as we used to, but it's still good to have them as a precaution.